There is a strange paradox that the more we chase meaning, the more it eludes us. Like a shadow that grows longer the harder we shine the light. We live in a time of restless striving, always reaching, always doing, believing that action alone holds the key to fulfillment. But what if I told you that there is a deeper force at work, that in the quiet surrender of doing nothing, in the courageous pause of stillness, the self begins to speak? Today, I invite you to explore not the world outside, but the world within. To stop grasping for control, and instead allow the unconscious to unfold its mystery. Do nothing, and you may discover that everything was already moving into place. In our modern world, we are conditioned to believe that value lies in visibility. We think that only what is seen, spoken, or accomplished matters. We reward movement, productivity, and proof. In this relentless pursuit of doing, we often overlook the invisible processes that shape our lives beneath the surface. Yet, as Carl Jung reminded us, it is not the conscious mind alone that governs our path, it is the unconscious, that vast and hidden landscape within us, which directs far more than we dare to admit. To say that the unconscious is always at work is not merely poetic, it is a psychological truth. While you are caught in the web of your waking responsibilities, the unconscious is sorting, shaping, guiding. It holds every memory you've forgotten, every instinct you've repressed, every dream you've half remembered. It is not idle, it is never still. Like roots in the dark soil, it is quietly feeding the tree of your becoming, and just because you cannot see the roots doesn't mean they aren't vital. On the contrary, they are the source of life. There is a peculiar arrogance in thinking we can consciously construct the entirety of our destiny. We act as if sheer willpower, conscious effort, and rational planning are the only forces that matter. But the psyche doesn't operate like a machine. It is organic, symbolic, and layered. The unconscious moves in dreams, in moods, in symbols, in the quiet shifts of intuition. It nudges us through synchronicity, through patterns we can't quite explain, through moments that feel charged with meaning even if we can't logically justify them. When you are at a crossroads in life, your impulse may be to act, to decide, to push forward, to wrestle clarity from the chaos. But often, what is really needed is stillness. Doing nothing in this context is not laziness or neglect. It is respect. It is the humble acknowledgement that something deeper than your ego is in motion, and your task is not to interfere, but to listen. Give space to allow. Trusting the silent movement of the unconscious is an act of surrender. It is a letting go of the illusion of control, and yet, paradoxically, it is in this surrender that true inner guidance begins to emerge. When the conscious mind stops shouting, the voice of the deeper self can be heard. That voice does not speak in commands or schedules. It reveals itself through symbols, through archetypes, through images that rise unbidden from the depths. This is the language of dreams, of myths, of art. It is the language of transformation. We often associate doing nothing with passivity, but Jung saw it differently. In the realm of the psyche, doing nothing can be the most active thing you can do. It creates a sacred space where the unconscious can express itself without interference. This is why Jung valued practices like active imagination, dream analysis, and even solitude, not as escapes from the world, but as doorways into it. Into the real world, the inner one, where the roots grow. Consider the times in your life when clarity came, not after frenzied thinking, but after you let go. Perhaps after sleep, or a walk in nature, or a moment of silence. That is not coincidence. That is the unconscious given the room to work. Insight often comes not through effort, but through allowing the unseen process to complete itself in its own time. This trust in the unconscious also invites humility. We are not the sole authors of our story. We are co-creators, participating in something larger than our own intentions. And just as you do not command the seasons to change or the tides to turn, you do not command your inner transformations. You create the conditions for them, and then you wait. You trust. You respect the mystery. This is not an easy trust to cultivate. It requires the courage to step back, the patience to endure uncertainty, and the wisdom to see that stillness is not emptiness. It is incubation, it is preparation, it is the soul rearranging itself beneath the surface, shaping the next version of who you are becoming. The unconscious is always in motion, always processing, always preparing. You do not have to force it. You only have to stop obstructing it. In our culture, we are taught to glorify the struggle. We believe that change must come through effort, through conflict, through the sheer exertion of our will. Against the chaos of life, the metaphor of the warrior dominates our imagination. We are told to fight for our dreams, to battle through hardship, to conquer fear and doubt. But beneath this heroic ideal lies a deeper truth, one that Carl Jung articulated through his life's work. Transformation does not begin in the battlefield of the ego. It begins in the still, quiet places within. It begins when we stop struggling. Stillness is not stagnation. It is not the absence of life, but the presence of depth. Just as a calm lake reflects the sky only when its surface is undisturbed, the psyche reveals its truths only when the conscious mind ceases its agitation. In stillness, the noise of the external world subsides, and we begin to sense the movement of something older, more essential, rising from within. The ego, with all its desires and fears, becomes quiet. And in that silence, self begins to emerge. Transformation, as Jung understood it, is not about adding something new to ourselves, but about uncovering what has always been there, hidden beneath layers of adaptation, persona, and defense. It is a process of remembering, not acquiring. But the memory we are searching for does not respond to force. You cannot wrestle it into consciousness. You must wait for it, make space for it, trust that it will reveal itself when the time is right. This is the essence of stillness, a disciplined receptivity, a listening with the whole soul. Struggle often stems from the ego's refusal to let go. We want to direct, to plan, to mold our lives according to our conscious ideas of who we should be. But the self, the totality of the psyche, has its own logic, its own rhythm, its own wisdom. When we try to force change according to our limited vision, we often end up in inner conflict. We push against the current of our own becoming. True transformation, by contrast, comes when we stop resisting what is, when we are finally still enough to witness what the unconscious is trying to bring forth. This is not to say that suffering plays no role in transformation. Jung never denied the reality of pain, but he also saw that suffering, when approached consciously, can be a doorway to deeper insight. It is not the struggle itself that transforms us. It is what the struggle reveals when we become quiet enough to reflect on it. Without stillness, suffering remains noise. With stillness, it becomes meaning. Many people mistake action for progress. They chase goals, initiate changes, and fill every moment with activity. But activity without awareness leads only to exhaustion. It is possible to run in circles for years, always busy, never changed. Stillness, on the other hand, requires you to face yourself without distraction, to sit with your own discomfort, to listen to the whispering voices of your forgotten parts. And in that intimate confrontation with the self, a subtle shift begins, a realignment, a reordering of the inner world. This process cannot be rushed. It unfolds in its own time, guided by an intelligence deeper than reason. Just as seeds germinate in the darkness of soil, so too do the seeds of transformation take root in the darkness of stillness. Jung called this the individuation process, the slow integration of the conscious and unconscious into a fuller, more authentic whole. It is not achieved by striving, but by surrendering to what is already unfolding within you. Stillness demands trust. It asks you to believe that your psyche knows what it is doing, even when you do not understand it. It challenges your addiction to control and offers instead the radical notion that wisdom emerges not from effort, but from presence. that you are not here to sculpt your soul like a block of marble, but to discover the shape already waiting beneath the stone. This is not the path of passivity. It is a different kind of strength, one that holds space, one that listens deeply, one that waits with dignity for the truth to rise. It is the strength of the womb, of the cave, of the silent mountain. Transformation begins when we stop demanding that life fit our expectations and instead allow life to show us what it wants to become through us. At the heart of much of our inner turmoil lies a fundamental tension between the ego and the self. The ego, in Jungian psychology, is our center of consciousness. It is the I that we identify with, the part of us that navigates daily life, that plans, organizes, and defines our identity in the world. It is necessary, and without it, we would be unable to function. But the ego, for all its usefulness, is also inherently limited. It clings to identity, to certainty, to control. It resists change because it fears dissolution. It fears not being in charge. The self, on the other hand, is not the ego. It is the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. It is the larger wholeness of who we are, what we have been, what we are becoming, and what we do not yet know about ourselves. The self is not something we create. It is something we uncover. It is already there, waiting beneath the surface of our constructed identities. And unlike the ego, the self does not cling. It allows, it flows, it trusts. When we say the ego clings, we are speaking to the way the conscious mind tries to secure its position, its narrative, its sense of mastery. The ego wants to be right, to be safe, to be admired. It wants to be the author of its fate. But life, with all its mystery and contradiction, rarely conforms to the ego's demands. Things fall apart, roles shift, dreams dissolve. In these moments, the ego panics. It grasps at meaning, tries to restore order, resists the unraveling. This is where suffering intensifies, not because of the loss itself, but because of the ego's refusal to let go. The self responds differently. It does not resist what is. It embraces the process. It understands that death is part of life, that endings are the threshold of new beginnings, that loss can be the soil in which deeper truth takes root. The self allows life to unfold without needing to manipulate every outcome. This allowance is not passive, it is deeply engaged. But it is engaged with openness rather than control, with presence rather than force. In Jungian work, much of the inner journey involves loosening the grip of the ego so that we can live more in alignment with the self. This is not about destroying the ego, but about putting it in its proper place. The ego is a tool, not a master. When it overextends itself, it blocks the deeper movement of the psyche. It insists on its version of reality, even when that version no longer serves us. This is why change often feels so threatening. We are being asked to release the old structures that once gave us identity, to let go of the familiar roles we've outgrown. Letting go is terrifying to the ego. It interprets surrender as failure, as weakness. But to the self, surrender is a form of wisdom. It is the recognition that we are not in control of everything and that we don't need to be. The self lives in alignment with the deeper rhythms of life. It allows for mystery, for darkness, for uncertainty. It knows that growth happens not through dominance but through integration. This distinction between the ego's clinging and the self's allowing shows up in countless ways in our lives. In relationships, the ego demands to be understood, to be validated. Win arguments, the self seeks connection, mutuality, authenticity. In career and ambition, the ego seeks status, achievement, comparison. The self seeks purpose, contribution, alignment with inner values. In the face of suffering, the ego asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The self asks, "What is this asking me to see?" We are not meant to eliminate the ego, but to mature it, to teach it to bow to the larger process of the self. This requires humility, patience, and above all, trust. Trust that something wiser than our conscious mind is guiding our path. Trust that the dismantling of our plans may be part of larger design. Trust that the self, when given space, will lead us not away from life, but deeper into it. To live from the self is to live in participation with life, not in opposition to it. It is to recognize that our real power does not come from clinging, but from our ability to remain open in the midst of uncertainty. The ego says, "Hold on." The self says, "Let it come." This is the shift that brings true inner freedom. We live in a world that is obsessed with causality. We are taught to believe that every event must have a linear explanation, every result a clear and measurable cause. From childhood, we are conditioned to operate within this framework. Study hard, get good grades, work tirelessly, succeed, act decisively, control your fate. Within this paradigm, doing nothing appears to be failure, a passive, unproductive state that contributes nothing to progress. But there is another realm of experience, one that Carl Jung explored with great reverence, where the logic of the universe operates not through cause and effect, but through meaning. This is the realm of synchronicity. Synchronicity, as Jung described it, is the occurrence of meaningful coincidences that have no direct causal relationship, yet feel deeply connected. These are the moments when an answer arrives before you've asked the question, when you meet the right person at the right time, when a book falls into your hands with the exact wisdom you needed. These events cannot be explained by logic alone. They come from a deeper orchestration of reality, one that becomes visible only when we stop trying to control everything and begin to participate in the unfolding. Doing nothing, in the Jungian sense, is not laziness or avoidance. It is the deliberate cessation of ego-driven effort. It is stepping out of the narrow tunnel of willpower and opening oneself to the broader field of experience. When we stop pushing, striving, and planning every detail of our lives, something surprising happens. Space is created, and into that space, synchronicity can enter. It is not that synchronicity begins in the stillness, it is that we become capable of perceiving it there. The ego, in its ceaseless drive to manage reality, often drowns out the subtle signals that the unconscious sends. When we are constantly preoccupied, when our minds are filled with noise, we miss the quiet movements of the deeper psyche. We overlook the signs, the patterns, the repetitions that point us toward meaning. But when we pause, when we enter a state of not doing, we tune into another frequency. We become receptive, and the universe, or the unconscious, begins to speak in symbols. These symbols often arrive in dreams, in encounters, in what Jung called numinous experiences, moments charged with an energy that seems to transcend ordinary awareness. To the rational mind, these experiences may appear random or insignificant, but to the soul they resonate. They feel like answers. They carry the weight of purpose. Synchronicity does not obey the logic of effort. You cannot force it and you cannot plan it. It appears when you align with your inner truth, when your outer life reflects your inner state. Jung believed that synchronicities are manifestations of the self, signposts that you are on the right path or that you are being redirected toward a more authentic way of being. But this guidance cannot emerge when the ego is clinging to its own script. It can only arise when the ego steps aside. This is why doing nothing is so powerful. It is an invitation to step out of the ego's narrative and into the larger narrative of the self. It is the creation of a sacred pause, a liminal space between what was and what could be. In that space, synchronicities can flourish. You are no longer dictating the terms of your life. You are listening to what life is offering you, and often, what emerges in that silence is more meaningful, more aligned than anything you could have manufactured through sheer will. Jung's own life was marked by synchronicities that shaped his thinking and validated his theories. He saw in these moments a profound unity between the inner and outer worlds, a kind of mirror where what occurs within is reflected in the events of the world around us. But he also warned that we must be attentive. We must be quiet enough, present enough, to notice when the unconscious is trying to reach us through the outer world. In the act of doing nothing, shift from the role of creator to co-creator. We no longer see ourselves as the sole architects of our fate, but as participants in a deeper unfolding. We begin to notice how people, events, and opportunities appear not by our design, but as responses to our inner condition. Synchronicity is not magic, it is alignment. It is the echo of our unconscious in the world around us. But to hear the echo, we must first stop speaking. We must become still. We must allow the invisible connections to reveal themselves. Much of our energy is spent trying to impose order on the world outside of us. We seek clarity in our careers, harmony in our relationships, stability in our routines, and certainty in our futures. We often believe that if we can just organize the external aspects of life, our finances, our goals, our schedules, then peace and happiness will naturally follow. But again and again, despite our best efforts, things fall apart. Plans unravel, emotions erupt, relationships fracture, and we find ourselves overwhelmed, confused, and disconnected. Carl Jung offered a different insight. The outer world is not the true source of our chaos. The root lies within, and it is only by turning inward and finding alignment with ourselves that we can begin to bring genuine in order to the world around us. Inner alignment is not simply about having good intentions or positive thoughts. It is the state of being where our thoughts, feelings, instincts, and values are no longer in conflict. It is the point at which we stop betraying ourselves for the sake of appearances or expectations. When we are in inner alignment, there is a quiet coherence to our being, a sense that we are not fighting ourselves, not divided, not pretending. This alignment creates a field of clarity that radiates outward. The more attuned we are to our inner truth, the more our outer circumstances begin to reflect that truth in subtle and powerful ways. When we are misaligned internally, our actions become distorted. We may say yes when we mean no. We may pursue goals that do not resonate with us, or stay in situations that drain our energy and dim our spirit. Outwardly, we might appear successful or composed, but inwardly we are fragmented, and no amount of external order can compensate for that inner dissonance. The outer world becomes chaotic not because it is inherently disordered, but because it mirrors the chaos within. Jung understood that the psyche seeks wholeness, not perfection, and wholeness requires that we integrate all aspects of ourselves, not just the parts we like or that the world approves of. This includes our shadow, our wounds, our contradictions. The process of inner alignment begins when we stop rejecting those parts and instead begin to listen to them, to understand what they are trying to tell us. When we bring these hidden aspects of ourselves into consciousness, we begin to move towards psychological integration. And from that place of inner wholeness, a new kind of order begins to emerge, one that is not forced but organic. The challenge is that this process often feels invisible. It lacks the tangible metrics we rely on to measure progress. It can feel like doing nothing, like waiting in uncertainty, like pausing while the rest of the world rushes ahead. But what is really happening in those quiet moments is reorientation, realignment. The psyche is finding its center again, and when that inner center holds, everything else begins to arrange itself accordingly. Think of the image of a wheel. If the hub is off-center, spokes cannot rotate smoothly. The whole mechanism becomes strained, inefficient, erratic. But when the hub is perfectly centered, everything moves in harmony. Our inner world is the hub. When we are aligned within, when we act in ways that are true to our values, when our desires are not in conflict with our beliefs, when our instincts are honored rather than repressed, then life begins to flow more easily, decisions become clearer, relationships deepen, opportunities arise without frantic chasing. This is not coincidence. It is alignment manifesting as outer order. Many people spend their lives trying to fix what is outside without ever examining what is inside. They rearrange their circumstances, change their partners, switch jobs, move cities, all in the hope that something out there will finally bring peace. But the discomfort follows them because it was never about the outer world to begin with. It was a symptom, not the cause. The real work is inward. The The real transformation happens when we align our outer choices with our inner truth. This kind of alignment requires honesty, the courage to admit when we are off course, and the willingness to stop and recalibrate. It also requires patience, because inner change does not always produce immediate results. But over time, the effects become undeniable. Life begins to reflect back to us the clarity we have cultivated within. Outer order is not something we chase. It is something we attract through the integrity of our being. In a world driven by ambition, productivity, and control, letting go is often misunderstood. It is viewed as giving up, as failure, as passivity. We are taught from a young age to hold on to dreams, to relationships, to goals, to images of success. To let go, we are told, to lose. Yet Carl Jung, in his deep exploration of the human psyche, revealed a truth that runs counter to this cultural programming. Letting go is not weakness. It is a radical act of power. It is the strength to surrender control, to release attachment, and to make space for something deeper, more authentic, and more aligned with the self. The ego, ever desperate to maintain its position and identity, clings tightly. It clings to stories, expectations, and the illusion that it can determine the course of life by sheer will. But life, in its deeper dimensions, does not obey the ego's command. It unfolds according to a mystery we can feel but not fully comprehend. Letting go is the moment when the ego bows to this mystery. It is the decision to stop wrestling with what cannot be changed and to begin trusting the movement of the deeper psyche. Letting go does not mean apathy. It does not mean abandoning responsibility or becoming indifferent to life. Rather, it means ceasing to resist what already is. It is the relinquishing of inner resistance to reality. Often, what causes us pain is not the event itself, but our refusal to accept it. The loss, the change, the silence, these are part of the human journey. When we resist them, we suffer. When we let go, we begin to heal. There is immense power in that surrender. It is the power of alignment with truth, even when that truth is painful. It is the power of no longer needing to control outcomes or manage every detail of life. This kind of power is quiet, not loud, internal, not external. It emerges from the center of our being where the self resides. When we let go, we stop acting from fear and begin acting from trust. Trust in life, trust in the process, trust in the deeper wisdom of our own unconscious. Letting go often begins with grief. We grieve what could have been, what we hoped for, what we thought we needed. But grief is not a weakness. It is a form of inner cleansing. It clears space in the psyche for something new to enter. It strips away illusions and leaves us with what is real. This is the fertile ground from which transformation grows. As long as we are holding on, clinging to the past, to certainty, to fixed identities, we are not free, we are bound. Letting go is the key to liberation. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, as a journey that requires us to shed old layers of self. These layers are often built from the expectations of others, the coping mechanisms of childhood, or the social masks we wear to survive. To individuate, we must release these false selves. This release is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice. Each time we let go of what no longer serves us, we move closer to our essence. The paradox is that what we most fear losing is often what we most need to release. We fear that without control, we will fall apart. But what truly falls away in letting go is not the self, but the illusion. What remains is more authentic, more grounded, more whole. This is the deeper power that Jung pointed to, the power of the self to guide, to hold, to transform. Once the ego stops obstructing its path, letting go also opens us to the unknown. This is perhaps why it feels so terrifying. The ego thrives on certainty and predictability, but the self lives in a space beyond certainty. It is connected to the larger flow of life, which is inherently mysterious. When we let go, we step into that mystery. We allow life to unfold without dictating its terms. This is not resignation. it is participation. It is a shift from force to flow. In this space, we begin to see that control was always an illusion, that holding on did not protect us, it only limited us, that our greatest strength lies not in our ability to dominate life, but in our capacity to trust it. Letting go is how we move from survival to presence, from contraction to expansion. It is the path to freedom, not through conquest, but through surrender to the wholeness that already lives within us.